Have you ever watched a video, understood it perfectly, and then realized the next day that you couldn't actually do the thing it explained? You followed every word, it made sense. You felt clear, but nothing changed. That experience reveals something important. Understanding is not the same as learning, and learning is not what most people think it is. Learning is not about collecting information. It is not about thinking harder. It is not about being motivated. Learning is a biological process. It is something your brain physically does. And today we're going to break down exactly how that works. At its core, learning is change inside the brain. Not metaphorical change, physical change. Your brain is not fixed. It is plastic. That does not mean soft. It means changeable. Neurons form connections. Those connections strengthen, some weaken. New ones appear, old ones reorganize. Every time you practice something, your brain responds. The key word there is practice. Because the primary driver of learning is not thought. It is behavior. We can reduce learning to a simple model. Your brain changes in three main ways. First, through temporary chemical shifts. This is short-term memory. Second, through structural rewiring. This is long-term memory. Third, through functional reorganization. This is efficiency and performance. And the most powerful trigger for all three is effortful behavior, especially behavior that includes difficulty. Let's unpack this carefully. When you first encounter new information and pay attention to it, your brain releases chemicals called neurotransmitters. These chemicals increase activity in specific neural circuits. The circuits light up, so to speak. This allows you to hold information in mind briefly. You can repeat it. You can explain it. You can recognize it. This is short-term memory. It is temporary activation. It is flexible. It is reversible. If you stop engaging, the activation fades. This is why you can understand something in the moment but forget it later. Nothing permanent has happened yet. Now imagine you repeat the task. You attempt it again. You retrieve the information from memory. You struggle slightly. With repetition, something deeper begins to occur. Connections between neurons strengthen. This is often summarized as neurons that fire together wire together. Synapses become more efficient at transmitting signals. Sometimes new connections form entirely. Circuits reorganize. This is structural change. This is long-term memory. Unlike chemical activation, structural rewiring is durable. It remains even after the initial chemicals fade. This is why practice matters. Because repetition is what tells the brain this is important. Keep this. But learning does not stop at structure. With continued practice, the brain becomes more efficient. It recruits fewer neurons to perform the same task. Signals travel faster. The activity becomes more refined. This is functional change. It is optimization. Think about learning to type. At first, you look at every key, you move slowly, your whole hand tenses. After enough practice, your fingers move automatically. You are not thinking about each letter. The system has reorganized itself, less effort, more precision, that is functional refinement. So we have three layers: temporary chemical activation, structural rewiring, functional optimization, and all three are driven primarily by behavior. Not passive exposure, not intention, behavior. This has important psychological implications. First, watching is not learning. Watching activates circuits temporarily, but unless you retrieve, apply, or practice, structural change is minimal. This is why passive consumption feels productive. You understand the explanation, you feel clarity, but when you try to perform the task yourself, the skill is not there. Because understanding is activation, learning is rewiring. Second, struggle is not a sign of failure. It is a sign that the system is being stressed, and biological systems adapt to stress. When you lift weights, muscle fibers experience strain. The body responds by rebuilding them stronger. Neural circuits respond the same way. Difficulty increases engagement. Increased engagement increases chemical signaling. That signaling supports structural change. Struggle amplifies learning. Comfort maintains the current structure. This challenges a common misunderstanding. Many people believe that if something feels hard, they are bad at it. In reality, difficulty is often the biological requirement for change. If it feels easy, you may only be activating circuits you already have. If it feels challenging, you are likely building new ones. Another misunderstanding is believing that rereading or rewatching is studying. Re-exposure can strengthen familiarity. But familiarity is not performance. The brain changes most when you attempt retrieval, when you try to recall without looking, when you try to perform without assistance. Because retrieval forces circuits to fire actively, and active firing is what drives wiring. There is also a deeper identity implication here. Repeated behavior reshapes neural structure. Neural structure shapes performance. Performance shapes self-perception. If you practice consistently, your brain changes. As your brain changes, your skill improves. As your skill improves, you begin to see yourself differently. Confidence, in many cases, is the result of structural change, not the cause. Practice precedes identity. This reframes motivation as well. Motivation can initiate behavior, but behavior is what produces learning. You do not wait to feel ready, you begin. The brain responds to what you repeatedly do. Let's translate this into practical terms. If you want to learn faster, reduce passive intake, increase behavioral repetition. After watching something, close it, explain it from memory, write it without notes. Attempt the task yourself. Introduce small amounts of difficulty. Not overwhelming difficulty, just enough to require effort. Because effort signals importance. If you want to build skill, avoid staying in ease. Staying comfortable maintains current wiring. Strategic friction drives adaptation. If you are teaching others, make them engage. Ask questions, require retrieval, let them struggle briefly. The goal is not immediate perfection. The goal is structural change. And if you are trying to change habits, remember this. Habits are patterns of neural firing that have been repeated. To change the habit, you change the behavior consistently. Repetition reshapes structure. Structure changes function. Function influences identity. No repetition. No structural change. Now here is where the transformation occurs. Most people believe learning is about understanding. If they understand something clearly, they assume they have learned it. But the deeper truth is this. Learning is biological change driven by behavior. Understanding is temporary activation. Learning is structural adaptation. There is another shift. Many people think, if this feels hard, I'm failing. The biological perspective says something different. If this feels hard, my brain is adapting. That shift changes how you study. It changes how you practice. It changes how you interpret frustration. Instead of avoiding difficulty, you seek it in measured amounts. Instead of equating ease with progress, you look for engagement. We can summarize the entire model simply. Behavioral effort leads to neurochemical activation. Repeated activation leads to structural rewiring. Continued practice leads to functional optimization. Difficulty amplifies adaptation. No behavior, no change. Once you see learning this way, many things start to make sense. Why cramming rarely produces lasting skill. Why passive scrolling feels productive but doesn't improve performance. Why consistent small practice outperforms intense but rare effort. Why struggle, when managed properly, is necessary. And this leads to an important question. If learning depends on behavior driving neural change, how do behaviors become automatic in the first place? How does repetition turn into something that feels effortless? How does the brain decide which patterns to keep and which to discard? That is where habits come in. Because habits are not just routines, they are stabilized neural pathways. In the next video, we will examine how habits form at the neural level, how repeated behavior transitions from effortful to automatic, and how you can intentionally shape that process. If learning is biological change, habits are biological stability. Understanding that connection changes how you approach growth entirely. I'll see you there.